Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, get your mustache straps, because we're boarding the Orient Express for murder.
This is no ordinary train. This is the legendary Orient Express, witness to many strange adventures and foreign intrigues. From Istanbul to Calais. This is no ordinary passenger.
Monsieur Poirot is a detective.
This is the world's most celebrated crime fighter.
I take a professional interest in crime.
Agatha Christie's brilliant Belgian detective.
Oh, Belgians? I always thought you were French.
Albert Finney is Detective Hercule Poirot. This is no ordinary mystery.
I touch nothing.
This is Agatha Christie's most perfect crime. Murder on the Orient Express.
Murder on the Orient Express. Andy, do you have something to say? Would you like to open the bidding?
I just want to say, that was a fine mustache strap that Hercule Poirot
It was
wore.
a fine
Hairnet and mustache strap.
It was a
No wonder I never have liked
strap.
mustaches. I just didn't have the right strap for
You
it.
don't have a strap. That's exactly right.
Wow.
And I'll
The
bet
things you
I'll bet
learn.
when you shave, I'll bet Hercule shaves with a straight razor. I'll bet you do not.
No.
What do you shave with?
I see people get killed with those.
Do you
Won't
do you-
use those.
are you a wet shaver or are you a dry shaver?
I'm a wet shaver. Who shaves dry?
I mean, with a machine, with the electrical machine.
with a like a clipper,
An electric
or
razor.
like an electric shaver. No,
Yeah, electric shaver. You don't use
no,
one
you
of
don't
those.
get a smooth
No.
shave with an electric shaver.
No, you don't. It's a terrible
That's
superficial
nonsense.
shave.
Yes,
You know who uses that? Journalists.
I gotta get out the door.
Hey, let's.
Gotta hit the beat. Shave the
Wait.
car. I
We're
don't know what
talking
that was,
about.
but anyway.
We're talking about Sidney Lumet's take on Murder on the Orient Express, the classic Agatha Christie whodunit, and starring the well-adapted Hercule Poirot, one of her most famous and enduring characters. This time played by Albert Finney. We're doing this in part for our Ingrid Bergman series, which you may be confused about because she's hardly in this movie.
Yep.
But she was there. She did show up, and she had an apparently an award-winning scene. What'd you think of this one?
Well, we have talked about Kenneth Branagh's recent remake on the film board. We watched that, and JJ, Tommy, and I discussed what Branagh did and how he adapted it and what our thoughts were there. I think I can see why this is a murder mystery that people want to adapt. There's an interesting element to the story, the fact that it has this interesting whodunit twist that you don't find in many murder mysteries. The fact that it boils down to this twist that I guess we'll just say, spoiler alert now, everybody did it. The whole kit and caboodle, everybody on the train pretty much is involved in this murder. And it's a really interesting twist. I think that it works really well. And I think it speaks to the point of an element of murder and why they did it. And I think what I find interesting about the story is the way that it puts Poirot into this interesting conundrum about how we should proceed. He figures out what happened, but is that what should be reported? It was a murder, a repulsive murderer that was killed. Should that person be allowed to be killed without having the same justice brought to him that the people that he had killed did not have? And so it's an interesting story. I haven't read the book. I enjoy the story. I think that there are some really interesting characters in the story. I also haven't seen a lot of Agatha Christie adaptations, nor have I read many of her books. But what I do find in the few that I've read and the few films that I've seen is that her style of mystery storytelling is very specific to the genre, where they have these characters and this is the mystery and here's the puzzle, and now we're going to watch the pieces get kind of solved and put into place. And it works really well in context of the story. When you kind of step back and you try to absorb it outside of that in kind of a bigger scope, it kind of loses a little steam. I think this is a really interesting story, but it's not like a solid film. It's not something that you watch because there's really compelling character arcs and everything. I mean, you see the mystery get put into place and then solved, and then it kind of it flags a little bit after that because there's just not much more beyond it, other than kind of the pieces I'd already spoken about, the kind of the interesting twist with this one. And then the struggle that I always have is you end up in this place where once you've seen it, especially with these types of mysteries, because the characters aren't as rich, you end up in this place where you just start watching these people move pieces around.
Yeah. And there's nothing really interesting about it. I think it all hinges, for me at least, on who's playing Poirot, right? Who's the detective, and what is it that he is bringing to the table, to the performance, to allow us to invest in his methodology, right, and his peculiarities, because that's central to caring about how he goes about being stuck right in the middle of this morality play that he finds himself in the middle of. And to your point, I think you're exactly right. Like, this is it's a very difficult story, and it's not it ends up being more than the run of the mill sort of whodunit, because it is Poirot's unsolvable mystery, right? He knows what happened, but he is, he proclaims he is beyond judgment, right? He can't actually pass judgment on this. And in that regard, the trouble that I have with this film, as much as I do enjoy the way they approach it, and the way they approach compression in the train, and the way they approach, the way the camera moves in to show us details, to reveal details as we go along, I think the film does a good job, an able job at allowing us to keep up with what they need us to see at any given point, and that I find is fun. I think Albert Finney is less of a Poirot than Kenneth Branagh. I think he is a central upgrade to the film, to the remake last year, precisely because of the weight he puts on the morality part, on that central change, right? That central morality transgression at the end. And his performance in that final reveal is so much stronger. And the weight of the world that sits on his shoulders is so much heavier than on Albert Finney, who essentially just wipes his hands of the thing and goes about his business. And I don't care for that. I get that it's kind of a character choice, but I needed to see this Poirot feel something, and I don't see it on screen. The end of the film, when they make the decision, I think I'll go with choice number one, it is resolved so quickly without any consequence, and that drives me bonkers for a movie that otherwise I think is pretty good and I have a good time with. The end it detracts from the goodwill that it builds to that point.
There are a few points about Poirot that you brought up. I mean, I agree. And it's a struggle I have, and I don't think that we can fully pin it to Albert Finney and Kenneth Branagh. I think it really boils down to the screenwriters that were adapting the script, the directors, all of that. This was 1974, and I feel like they were really working on making, and again, I haven't read the book, but I feel like it's a trying to be a more faithful adaptation to the story, right? You don't get a lot of kind of backstory with Poirot. You just get, this is this guy, he's here, and this is this case that now he's kind of stuck in the middle of.
Right. His credentials are built by the people around him, right? By the shock and awe that they have by being in his presence.
Exactly. Because of that, we're just kind of put in this place where here's this world famous detective, and that's that. And so then the story just moves forward in a very much kind of closed room murder mystery as he puts the pieces in place. What Branagh did, and I think the screenwriters, they looked at the story and they found ways to open it up and make it bigger. Now, it didn't always work. There was this mad chase with Josh Gad running down like the stairs on a bridge and stuff like that. It just was kind of nonsensical.
That was dumb.
I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
But you also did have more with Poirot, where you had him talking to the picture of his dead wife and things like that, that I don't know if they pulled those elements from other Poirot stories that Agatha Christie had written and kind of built those in to just kind of flesh his character out more. But it gave me so much more meat. Now, on the flip side of that, I think that what Albert Finney was working with, he did an incredible job, because I honestly, this is, I think, the most I've ever lost Albert Finney in a performance. Like, I just stopped seeing Albert Finney and I can't see anything but this character of Poirot, because he's such a peculiar character. And the way that he plays him is just spot on perfect, at least as my interpretation of what I think Poirot would end up being. I think Branagh is great, but I do still end up seeing Branagh underneath all of it. And I think he's terrific as Poirot, but there's something about Albert Finney that I love. I just wish that he was given the opportunity to take that script and do more with it that Branagh had the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I struggle with it because I feel like there's a certain Albert Finney performance, and I don't know. He has a little bit of the marbles in his mouth when he's going to his full sort of Belgian French experience, and I struggle to just understand him. The number of times I had to rewind the film and step back and hear sequences again because he was so buried in the part. I definitely get it, but I did go back and watch some clips of other people who portrayed Poirot that were interesting performances, like Ian Holm and Alfred Molina and Orson Welles, and John Malkovich did the ABC murders on BBC One, and the trailer for that looks terrific. What a strange assortment of people that we have over the decades that Poirot has been around, and my preference, it lands on Branagh because of and I think it's Branagh's film because of the performance at the end of the film. This version of it just falls apart for me at the end, no matter how much I like Albert Finney and to your point, his his just very invested performance as Poirot.
I think it's going to end up being one of those things. I mean, I think, what did I count? Like 11 different people who have played Hercule Poirot, and whether it's a TV movie or cinema. And I think that it's really interesting that he's just it's like Hamlet. It's a character that actors are inevitably going to be excited about the opportunity to play because it's a really interesting character. He's a very intelligent character. There's a lot you can do with it. And I mean, I agree with you completely. I think that Kenneth Branagh brought a lot to it. And I mean, I'm right there. As soon as Death on the Nile comes out in 2020, I'm very much looking forward to seeing him do that adaptation, because I think despite some of my thoughts about his adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express, he still did a great job with it. So yeah, it's an interesting character, and I think it's tricky to kind of evaluate our opinions on them. But I totally get it. I think that Hercule Poirot will be one of those characters that people will enjoy different actors depending on kind of what they want to take out of it. I mean, I know that David Suchet he was Poirot on that TV show that ran for, I don't know, like
forever.
5-6 years.
Right.
Yeah, it was just one of those shows that just seems to go on forever. So yeah, I think it's interesting. But yes, regardless of that, I think that we have kind of just we're stuck in a situation where we have a basic issue with kind of the way that this story is structured, because it is, like it or not, maybe a little closer adaptation to the original source material than Branagh's version. And because of that, it ends up being thinner. It ends up being a very straightforward murder mystery, despite the twists of the murder mystery. I'm not speaking to that, but just here's the crime, here's the detective, here are the red herrings, here's the solution. And that is exactly what we get. And it's interesting to go through it, but this is my second time watching this one now. And I just found myself kind of, okay, now we got to talk to this person. And it's not as involving.
It's a procedural. It might as well be, CSI Turkey.
At least that CSI is TV. Yeah, I get what you're saying. The TV show, though, gets more opportunity to really dig into the characters.
Well, and that's not what I'm really talking about. Just in terms of how they build each of the the people that we meet on the train. We're taking Poirot as as table stakes. Like, we know who he is, we know his methods. I'm assuming the royal we here, because he's been in 50 short stories and 30 books, and he's the royal we know who he is if we're followers of him. In this film, we come up against these transient characters, this family that we only get to experience sequence over a breath of time. And that makes it really hard because there are a lot of characters, a lot of very famous faces on this train. And it's hard to, maybe intentionally, hard to figure out who to follow, hard to figure out who to wage against. And in that regard, I actually think old Sidney does an able job of passing us the clues and moving us through the mystery as efficiently as he is possibly able to. I did not have, I absolutely agree with you. I struggle with that feeling of being invested in any given character. I don't care about the family's plight by the end, but I did find myself enjoying the mechanics of the investigation.
I do find by the time we get to the end and we understand what's going on, when we actually see the faces, particularly Lauren Bacall, who I think is a sign of strength in this film, I think that we're finally getting a sense of the emotions that were involved in this story. And it's a frustrating element that we had when we discussed the film board, more recent one, and with this one. You don't get really connected at all to young Daisy Armstrong and her family. This one did a better job in kind of setting that up, so you at least had a sense of that story, but still, you have no connection to these people. Now, it's possible when Agatha Christie wrote the book, we were, the times were a lot closer to when the book came out, which was in 1934, to when there was the baby? The
Lindbergh baby, yeah.
The Lindbergh baby, right, was kidnapped just a few years before. So I think the public probably had a much stronger connection to this story because they could very easily put themselves in the heads of everything that was in the press and the media and all that stuff about the Lindbergh baby and just the trauma. And it was very easy to kind of connect to that. And I think that helped this story where you didn't need to really have that set up for the family. Unfortunately, now I feel like it's in a place where without that, it's harder to connect these characters. And then it turns into this endless shuffle of now we'll talk to the next person and now we'll talk to the next person. And you're right. Because of that, it becomes this thing where you're just like, okay, I'm going to just look into the procedural and just see how all the pieces fit into place. And that's where I'm going to find my pleasure in the film.
One of the central differences between this and the remake is, specifically to your point, this one gives us the opening sequence where we get all the names and the pictures through the reels and the photos, the zooms on the newspapers and things. So we get a little bit of history, and we get essentially the act itself of the kidnapping. And so we get a little bit of a place in time for what happened leading us into the train. They removed that from the remake. Branagh removed that and replaced it with a scene where we get, Poirot plying his trade to a different mystery. What's your take on that? Because, my sense is, and in listening to the show that you guys did on the remake, you weren't keen on removing that sense of context. On rewatching, did you find that helped you here mechanically to get back into the frame of mind of the film? Did you need it?
I think so. I mean, that's the only thing we have to get any sense of what these people are kind of all concerned about, what this crime is revolving around. Without having that information, I think Tommy, when we talked on the film board about the Branagh version, he was very confused because he's like, they keep talking about this Armstrong case. And it's just like, I had no context of what that was. I think it's absolutely important to have. Now, I also really enjoyed the bit at the Wailing Wall at the beginning of Branagh's version, which is referenced in the beginning of this one, but we don't see it. We just have the police chief saying, "Oh, thank you so much for helping us." It's just like kind of like the platitudes at the end of that, which it's nice that it's there. It gives us a sense that something had happened, but I really liked that we got to see it. And, can't we have both? That would be my answer.
Okay, let's look at some of this massive cast in the family. And I think we should start, maybe because it's the easiest, we should probably start with our principal character for our series, Ingrid Bergman, as Greta Olsen.
Your point was very apt that you made earlier. The fact that this is an Ingrid Bergman series that we are doing right now, and that this film was selected as one of the films to be discussed in it. This is the least Bergman film of our Bergman films that we're discussing. She is a character on the train, but nothing more than that. And the fact that her performance was so singled out, I find really strange, especially because I don't think she's the strongest performance of the supporting actresses. And so it's an interesting choice to go with. I like what she's doing. I think that her performance is fine as this woman who has gone off to, she's not even sure, she says Africa, but really it would have been India, I guess, to do some missionary work. And, there's the religious aspect. And I think there are some interesting aspects to her character. But it ends up for me just becoming kind of another Christie character that she's here to play her part, and I don't find a lot of excitement with it.
Yeah, I really struggle with it. I struggled even more with it after I watched her acceptance speech for the Academy Award. It is, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's hard to see that and not completely agree with her that she's the wrong person for the award. And so I find it, I just find it troublesome. Now, her award-winning scene is a short one, but it's fine. It's a great little opportunity for a monologue, for her opportunity to tell a little bit of her story and to shake her voice a lot. I just couldn't get over the fact that as she ages, she looks so much more like her daughter every movie. I thought this was an older Isabella Rossellini wandering through the screen. It was shocking. So
that is funny. Well, she certainly ages gracefully.
She sure does.
I mean, we last talked about her in 1950, and is that right? Gosh, yeah, because now it's 1974.
Yeah,
we skipped a hefty chunk, and it is what it is. She went off and worked in Europe for a while because of the whole affair that she had with Rossellini, as we talked about last week, and then she kind of came back to Hollywood with Anastasia in 1956. And then was just kind of doing whatever. And just a lot of different projects. But this is the next one that we're talking about. And it's, I think it's a fair one to put on the list because she did win an Academy Award for it. So I think there's a reason and logic for it to be something that we discuss in our Ingrid Bergman series. But, I wasn't as wowed by this as perhaps the Academy voters were at the time.
Is this one of those things where she possibly won for a body of work, something immediately before? Was this an award for A Walk in the Spring Rain or Cactus Flower that they just finally got around to giving her something?
It's her third Oscar, so it's not like she had never won and they finally gave her one.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we've talked about two of the performances, Diane Ladd in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Talia Shire in The Godfather Part 2, and then she was up against Madeline Kahn in Blazing Saddles and Valentina Cortez in Day for Night. I mean, we haven't talked about Day for Night, and I haven't seen it. Blazing Saddles, I think Madeline Kahn is hilarious in that film.
Yes.
Talia Shire, we've talked about in The Godfather Part 2. She's great in that film. And definitely a supporting character. She's a big character. Same thing with Diane Ladd. Between the three, I would probably pick Diane Ladd. I thought that she was great in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Yeah. And it's a surprising win for me.
Okay, so moving on, we've talked a little bit about Albert Finney. He's, I think, apart from the procedural stuff, and he does an able job of diving into the part, I regret a little bit not being able to see the uninterrupted final presentation. His final speech is almost 30 minutes long, and it is continuously interrupted by either flashbacks or recreations in order to move us along the story. And that's all by necessity. I'm not complaining about that. I mean, we need to have that repeated sense of context there. But I feel like if there's a time for him to shine, and you can feel it that he's delivering this thing in as much long swaths of speech, I want to see those, I want to see as much uninterrupted as I can. And I feel like that sort of robbed him of a chance to really perform. But he's still great. And he's particularly great, in that third act, in the big reveal. It's why you show up, for the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, I really loved him through the whole thing. I think he's just a treat to watch. I just think he's so funny. I mean, he's got like no neck. The way that he kind of runs when there's that scene when he leaves the princess and runs to talk to her maid, and his run to catch up with her, to kind of catch her before she gets too close back to the princess's suite or her train car. It was so funny. Like I don't know, he cracks me up. The way he puts on the gloves when he's reading the newspaper, everything about him just made me laugh. I found him just a delight to watch from beginning to end. So
much of what he did to that point was unapologetic and unexplained. Like we don't see why he does so many of the things he does. He just does them because he's Poirot. Yeah. And I'm right with you. I think he is. He's very funny. And in terms of his kind of, he's Sherlock Holmes without any of the panache, right? That Sherlock Holmes is also quite strange, but he's much more sophisticated, I think. And so I quite liked him. The other, I should argue, more sophisticated character in here of Edward Beddoes, played by John Gielgud. I loved watching John Gielgud. It just always feels like he's meant to play the butler.
Right. Or God. I mean, I think that's the only time we've talked about him was when he played God. He's just fantastic. And I feel like, gosh, he's an actor I'd love to explore more because he's got a lot of great performances. And but it is funny how the ones where he plays the butler seem to be the ones that stick.
Anthony Perkins. I want to talk about Anthony Perkins because when Anthony Perkins holds the knife, you think, man, that guy's an actor.
Anthony Perkins is an actor who unfortunately gets bogged down anytime you see him, or at least for me, because I always think of Psycho. And what made me laugh watching this is having him asked if he loves his mother.
No.
It's just like, I go right to Psycho. I'm like, is he really the best choice when you have a line like that?
He just can't win.
No, and I honestly, I felt like he needed to like wink at the camera or something when he replied, just to acknowledge that there's a little bit of a joke in there. But it's not there. It's an interesting set of performances across the board. I don't know. Do you have favorites? Or
well, we got all my favorites. I think the ones the only other one that I really so we've unfortunately talked about mostly men so far because there were apart from Sean Connery as Colonel Arbuthnot, who was merged. He and the doctor, I think they got merged, Dr. Constantine in the remake. So we get to see them in their full feather here. I also quite liked Vanessa Redgrave. She was great to see. I was very surprised to see Jacqueline Bisset in the movie. I'd forgotten she was even in it as the Countess Helena Andrenier. And so I think there were some fine, again, procedural performances that nothing that really stood out to me in the rest of the characters. So.
I mean, Richard Widmark is always great as kind of the scummy guy, and he does fine here with that.
Playing the role of Johnny Depp.
Right, exactly. Lauren Bacall, for me, is the one who, her role is kind of a frustrating one. She's never my favorite character through the bulk of the film. Same thing with Michelle Pfeiffer. But by the time we get to the end and we're wrapping everything up, I find that that's where the real heart of the film comes. And watching her face as whether it's, truths being revealed or when everybody is going through the act and stabbing Cassetti, whatever it is, I feel that that's where there's a real heart to this film, and I find the soul in her face, and that is something that I really needed by the time I hit that point in the film, because that all of a sudden I felt like, okay, I get it. Now I'm here with all of this. It's not just about solving this puzzle. It's about solving this heartache for all of these people and this injustice. And what's frustrating, I think, is it really kind of takes an awfully long time to feel anything about any of these people. And I really appreciate that it's there. And I'm glad that it's Lauren Bacall, because I think that she can carry it and really does. But it's just frustrating that it's not until that climactic reveal at the end of the film that you get that. If anything, that is the performance that I would have said is more likely to be noticed as a supporting actress nomination. And I certainly felt that when I saw Branagh's version. I said, Michelle Pfeiffer, if anyone is going to get pushed for a performance Oscar out of this, it's Michelle Pfeiffer for supporting actress.
Yes.
Because she really had the emotional core of that film. So much more than Penelope Cruz, who played Ingrid Bergman's role. It was just such a small, insignificant part. And I really end up feeling that way about Ingrid Bergman in this film.
It's interesting, too, because when you hear Lumet talk about that role, and I'm speaking specifically in contrast to Penelope Cruz, they didn't give Penelope Cruz the big monologue opportunity, right, in that movie. She never had the chance to do what Lumet did for the part of Greta in this particular film. She had chosen a very small part, and I couldn't persuade her to change her mind. She was sweetly stubborn, but stubborn she was. Her part was so small, I decided to film her one big scene where she talks for almost 5 minutes straight in one long take. A lot of actresses would have hesitated over that. She loved the idea and made the most of it. She ran the gamut of emotions. I've never seen anything like it. Clearly she was moving at the time, but I'm with you in terms of weight of performance, and as kind of the leader of the stabbing scene, right? When they turn on the blue light, that is a haunting and terrifying sequence that I think is just terrifically executed, and that's Bacall's the one I notice in there.
I mean, and to your point, I will say yes, Ingrid Bergman does have a really strong scene, and to that end, sometimes that is all you need is to have a really incredibly powerful scene with an incredible actress who can pull it off. And that's an award-winning performance. Anne Hathaway did it for Les Mis, and kudos to her. And I think in that case, it's possible she did deserve it. She was really amazing in that performance. But it's just one of those things. I think that Ingrid Bergman, sure, maybe nominate her for the film, but I still would argue the point that it wasn't a deserved win.
You want to talk about getting it made?
Sure.
I think this is a fascinating story because apparently Agatha Christie had not been she'd not been enjoying the adaptations of her work to date, and was really not into having to giving the rights to selling the rights to this one again. And so it was a team approach. Nat Cohen, the chairman of EMI, and the film's producer John Bradbourne actually went to Lord Mountbatten of Burma, of the British royal family, and John Bradbourne's father-in-law, and had Lord Mountbatten of Burma go to Agatha Christie to actually request that this that she sell the rights. And so, she did, and it turns out I haven't found anywhere that says she liked it. I have nowhere that says she actually liked it. The quote from her husband is that she was, I love the quote, Agatha herself has always been allergic to the adaptation of her books by the cinema, but was persuaded to give a rather grudging appreciation to this one. She was not crazy about Albert Finney as Poirot. She said that he was supposed to have the finest mustache in England, and he didn't in the film. She says, I thought, what a pity. Why shouldn't he? which is delightful. She seems like a sort of a curmudgeon of a lady, and what a delight. The first cast member approached was Sean Connery. That Lumet said, with a cast like this, what are we going to do to get people to say yes to these, some cases quite small roles? Well, we're going to start with the biggest star on screen at the time, and we're going to, we're going to see if they can Pied Piper the rest of the cast. And it worked, saying everybody else just sort of fell right into place as soon as Connery was reported to have signed on. Yeah, it's interesting to me that they start with Connery, who ended up in, again, a sort of a meager role. I find myself fantasizing a little bit to see what he would have done with a role like Poirot. He never could have played the lead. He's just too tall. He doesn't have that sort of goofiness to him, but I do have that little fantasy.
That would have been an interesting thing. I mean, if Tony Randall can do it.
Tony Randall, right? That's bizarre. The inspiration to the film, we've already talked about the kidnapping of Charles and Anne-Marie Lindbergh's baby, Charles Lindbergh Jr., and then the story of the 1929 Orient Express train getting stuck in the snow for 5 days in Cherkesky.
I was wondering if you were going to try to pronounce that.
I did. I think I did a fine job. 81 miles outside of Istanbul. Those are the sort of dueling inspirations for the movie or for the the book, as it is written.
When did you first see this movie? Do you remember?
Oh, geez. Imagining college. I don't actually have a memory of the first time I saw the movie, but I've seen it a few times, and I had it in my collection. So, well, because it's one of those things. Like I always wonder, like, when do people come to Agatha Christie and start kind of seeing her stories? And because, like you said, she had adaptations. Back in the silent era. She was writing books back then, so why not? And a lot of these ones from the 40s, 50s, 60s, I hadn't seen any of those. I think the only one that I ever saw outside of this was The Mirror Cracked from 1980. Mm-hmm. And the only other book that I had read was And Then There Were None. And so I don't have a big experience of kind of her and her stories. But I do think it's interesting. And I'm always curious about her books. And so every time there's talk about Agatha Christie, I'm always like, gosh, I should read more of her books, because they definitely pique my curiosity, even if they are kind of simple, straightforward murder mysteries. But I think that she does it well. And that's, a thing that she did figure out. And so I can appreciate that she would be unhappy with adaptations and a bit of a curmudgeon with how things kind of played out with her work. So, I can totally appreciate it. And it does make me kind of want to weirdly read some of her books, I guess. So count that for a win for her. This is actually really interesting then. So you didn't see the 78 Death on the Nile. Nope. Where Peter Ustinov played it. He played it. I get the same.
He played it real good.
I sort of get the same feeling about. Hell, I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing, and absolutely worth checking out, particularly in the run up to the remake. And I think, sure it will, honestly, I think it's a better film for me. But these are really the only, I don't even think I think these are the only two that I've seen. And you know what's funny? As you were talking, I thought, why did I stop watching this movie? Because I was fascinated by it for a short period. And then I think it was when I was introduced to like Murder by Death and Clue. And like there was this period where more of these chaos murder houses came out all in a row. And I feel like I moved on from Murder on the Orient Express. There's also a bit of the romantic fascination with the film that, I do think it romanticizes the train in just the right way. And I find I want to be a part of it. I want to be on it. I want to sit in the dining car. And, my Amtrak dining car is just not like this. It's just not the same.
Right. There's something interesting about trains back in the day where, this was 1935. The story takes place.
Right.
That's how people got around.
That's interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it too. When do they come to Agatha Christie, and when do they fall off of Agatha Christie?
Yeah. Right. Like, when do you move past it because you just kind of need your murder mysteries to have a little more depth and a little more meat to them, not just kind of these simple puzzle solving exercises. And I say that so completely as a non-Agatha Christie reader. Like, maybe she really has some really complex books. I just, I've only read and then there were none. So I don't know if it's completely fair of me to say, but that's just my sense of them from the two films I've seen and the one book I've read. And can I, before we get into the technical stuff, I do have to ask a few questions, though, about the story.
No.
No, and I get the story. Like, it all makes sense to me. But this is where I end up struggling when you have a film like this. So all of these people, this is their plan. They're going to get on this train and they're going to commit this crime. And they're going to, my sense is they decide to go through these incredibly complex machinations only because Hercule Poirot ends up in the next room. Is that right? Or, I mean, were they going to kill Ratchet a little easier or not make it not quite so complicated if he had stayed down in the other room with Anthony Perkins? Or was this they were going to be just this grandiose all the time?
I think they were going to be this grandiose, but not because they were going to be just because they were fans of grandiosity, but because they were trying to stymie any, further investigation. Right. There's that whole part of the speech, which I think they bury a little bit about, 12 on a jury, 12 people committing the crime. Sure. And that it feels to me more central to the reason that they orchestrated this whole thing than just fodder for his soliloquy. That there is something to that is not explained.
There are clear pieces, though, that Poirot kind of points out that they did purely for his benefit, like the whole changing of the time on the clock, and to make it look like the murder happened that it happened at an earlier time. The whole faking of, when Anthony Perkins is like pretending to be Ratchet, and he's talking to the guard or the trainman, Jean-Pierre Cassel. And he's doing that, and Poirot kind of is listening out through his door. And then we have Lauren Bacall calling on her buzzer, and then somebody knocks on his door, and he sticks his head out, and there's the woman in the silk robe walking down the hall. Like, all of this stuff is done just to keep him awake so that the murder can happen later when everybody's sleeping. It seems awfully complicated to try to make all this work. Why not worry about all of that stuff and just wait until later? Like, I don't understand why they had to go through such complexities.
Well, and I think that, so much of the murder itself is ceremonial, right? Because you can't just watch this and think, well, they just made it too hard on themselves. They really did, but they did it for a deeply emotional reason. Otherwise, they could have just drugged Ratchet, right? Like when Anthony Perkins,
when he does it,
drugged him and then somebody go in and stab him while he's asleep. He didn't make any noise. Nobody made any noise. It would have been fine. But they needed to, you have to buy into the fact that everyone gets a shot, and that creates enough of a commotion that they have to make sure, everybody's asleep or that the train is otherwise quiet. And so I have it in my headcanon about this film that even if Poirot hadn't been there, like maybe they were taking some extra precautions, but even if they hadn't been there, they would have gone through a lot of these sort of mechanics for someone else, whoever else would have been on the train. Now, in this case, most of that carriage was taken up by them, I think. I don't think there was anybody else on there had it not been for all the moves to get Poirot there. So, maybe that you take with a grain of salt. But
and you've got the train. There's the people who work in the restaurant or the train, the food car. You've got Bianchi. So there are some other people that kind of pop in and out, even if there are they're minor. They're very
right.
minor.
They're minor. Right.
My other question that I have for you is, it's not really a question. It's just a concern, I think, that I would have being one of these people. What if Ratchet recognized any of these people? I mean, he was the person who was the number one complicit in killing Daisy, which led to 4 other people dying. And I'm sure that some of these faces had been in the news. Or did Daisy's grandmother, was she, like, her photo never put into the papers? Like, it just seems strange to me. Now, granted, I know it's 1935 or between 30 and 35. Not as many photos were in newspapers, except, the rich and famous sorts of things. But I think in a case like this, sure, grandma's photo is probably going to be in the paper. Do you think that Ratchet's going to recognize her when she comes onto the train? It was like, gosh, that's an awful lot of people to put onto a train that he might recognize just one of them.
Okay, so this was actually a central question that I had when you guys did the show on the remake, because I think they never actually fix that hole. I totally agree with you. This is, by all rights, an incredibly famous family, right? I mean, this is famous enough to have this.
It's like the Lindberghs. I mean,
it's the Lindberghs, right?
Yeah.
Of course, somebody is going to be noticed. Somebody is going to be noticed. And really, the dad is dressed up as the trainman and nobody catches that? Like, I don't buy the intrigue behind that if I stop and look at it. I totally agree with you, and I don't have an answer for it.
Frustrating.
I'm interested in your take on camera. This is a challenging film to move around, as was the other one, but they clearly used so many, digital effects and replacements and false walls and things in the remake.
Even though they're shooting on 65 millimeter.
Shooting on 65 millimeter from like security camera angles, but this film, they were dealing with some real practical challenges. How do you feel like the camera moved around the train? This is the work of, I should say, Jeffrey Unsworth.
I didn't notice it. I felt like Branagh put a little more of a stamp on his camera work, particularly like that last tracking shot that follows him through the whole train. Like, that was really kind of a beautifully done shot. In this particular case, what I noticed the most, which actually I really liked the way that Lumet chose to do this, was when you had Poirot going through the putting all the puzzle pieces into place at the end and talking to each of the people about, you said this and you said this. When he would cut to the person's face who said that, it would be a close-up wide-angle lens, so their face had a little bit of distortion, and the lighting would be much stronger, whether it was more toppy or more coming from the side. It was much different of a look than when we saw Poirot having that conversation with them earlier when they would say those things. And it was a really interesting way to kind of emphasize those points. And I liked that they did that. That was a really fun way to play around with that and give us a sense of the way that Poirot interpreted those things that they said, or I shouldn't say interpreted, but caught those moments that they said that became giveaways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that was a really nice visual trick to put us in Poirot's head, that sort of first person. I felt like, we were the third person sort of omniscient in the first time we see those passages, and then we're in Poirot's face, and I thought that was really nice. I think, back to that sequence of his big reveal too, they had to do that over and over and over again because they could not get the coverage with enough cameras or putting the camera in the right places to get that piece, to get that entire sequence in large enough chunks. And so that was done over and over and over dozens of times, Poirot's big final reveal speech, so that they could get it from all sorts of different angles. And that's a testament not just to the patience of the camera crew, but also the patience of the performers, who had to, be just rock still for so long for all of the continuity issues. And I didn't notice any of them for a single sequence that took so much time, was shot over so many days. I didn't notice any failings there, and that would have been where it happens.
Yeah. No, I thought it worked fine.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say this was standout as far as the cinematography, but I certainly thought they did a great job with what they were trying to do for the story.
Totally.
To that end, though, I do want to talk about the music. Just a few episodes ago, you had issue with the music in Spellbound because it was a great score, but you felt it was very poorly put into the film because it really kind of took you out of it because it just didn't feel like it fit.
Do you finally understand?
With this film, Richard Rodney Bennett, the music that he wrote, it's a gorgeous theme, but what a lilting, happy theme it is.
Yeah.
And when it kicks in, I mean, I feel like it's the train taking off theme, but it's like that. Why do we have a theme that is so positive and chippy? Chippy? Cheery?
Chippy?
Sure, that word is. It really didn't feel like it was in the right film, and it was frustrating. And I know it's a very popular track that has been remixed to do orchestra suites, and it's something that people play a lot because it's just a theme that sticks. But it just totally did not belong in this film for me. Really pulled me out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have to say, though, in some of it, however, it does fit Poirot. If you step back from the main lilting train is leaving theme and you go into some of the goofy, almost kind of vaudevillian track that follows Poirot around, I think some of that really does work. And, sure. It's goofy, calliope kind of circusy stuff. And that fits this bizarre character that we get to live with for 2 hours.
Yeah.
How to do it award season. We've already alluded to Ingrid. Did anybody else get any treatment?
This was a popular-ish film when award season rolled around. It had 9 wins, 16 other nominations. Over at the Academy Awards, it had 6 nominations, and the one win, as we already said, Ingrid Bergman winning for supporting actress. The losses, Albert Finney was nominated but lost to Art Carney for Harry and Tonto. The adapted screenplay lost to The Godfather Part 2. Best cinematography lost to The Towering Inferno. Best costume design lost to The Great Gatsby, and best original dramatic score lost to The Godfather Part 2. I haven't seen Harry and Tonto. I've heard good things about it, and I'm curious about it. I have a hard time arguing the other ones, so I feel like it. Maybe the smarter minds prevailed for the rest of the nominations.
Yeah.
Over at the BAFTAs, they had 9 nominations with 3 wins, plus a special award. The Anthony Asquith Award for Film Music. Richard Rodney Bennett got that. Oh, I don't know why, but he did. It's just a memorable theme, I guess. The awards were Best Supporting Actor, John Gielgud. He won. Best Supporting Actress, Ingrid Bergman. She won. As for the other awards that it did not win, Albert Finney was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Jack Nicholson. This is a weird thing with the BAFTAs where it would be just Jack Nicholson for his performances in Chinatown and The Last Detail. Mm-hmm. Best Art Direction lost to The Great Gatsby. Here's another one. Best Cinematography. Unsworth was nominated for this and Zardoz, but lost to The Great Gatsby. Best Costume Design. Right? I wonder if that's Zardoz's one nomination.
Yeah, right? That was it.
Curious. Best Costume Design lost to The Great Gatsby. Best Direction for this and Serpico, Sidney Lumet was nominated, but lost to Roman Polanski for Chinatown. Best Film lost to Lacombe Lucien, and Best Film Editing, Anne V. Coates, who we didn't talk about at all, but she did the editing for this, but lost to Chinatown, and I really have a hard time arguing with that because, man, what a great film that is.
Truly. If you want to see Sean Connery on the Orient Express in arguably a better movie, you should go watch From Russia with Love. It just occurs to me that there's a big train fight.
Are you saying that what this film is lacking is somebody's teeth getting electrocuted with the end of a broken light bulb?
Andy, yes, I'm saying that. I'm saying absolutely that.
Oh, man.
Good times. How to do at the box office?
Well, to bring this story to the screen, Lumet was given $1.4 million, which is just over $6.8 million in today's dollars. And honestly, that is really impressive considering his cast and considering that Branagh spent $55 million on his recent adaptation. This movie was released November 21st, 1974, hitting theaters in the U.S. Thanksgiving week. The movie was received really well, earning $35.7 million at the box office, or $278.1 million in today's dollars. That kept it just out of the top 10 of the year, but it still leaves it with an adjusted profit per finished minute of just over $2 million. All told, it's a solid return on investment for this Christie property.
I think it's time for us to rank it. I'm very curious.
Let's do it. Head
over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we talked about on this show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap Flickchart, you'll be able to jump straight to this film where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up to ours.
All right. We're going to be having our Bergman block right in the middle. Murder on the Orient Express or Stromboli. I will take some murder.
I will take some murder, too. I'm surprised at that.
And actually, the more I've been thinking about it, I'm like, I regret my choice last week. I feel like I should have picked Spellbound first, but it is what it is. We'll have to wait for our big re-ranking episode to see if we
Andy,
can
that'll
put things
take
right.
19 hours.
It will, I know.
All right.
19 great hours, Pete.
Best
Come
hours.
on, who are we kidding? Murder on the Orient Express or Seven Samurai. Absolutely, Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai, please.
Murder on the Orient Express or Mother.
Mother, please.
I will go with Mother as well. Murder on the Orient Express or Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
Sweeney Todd, please.
Sweeney Todd for me as well. Murder on the Orient Express or Creep Show.
Creep Show, please.
Absolutely, Creep Show. Murder on the Orient Express or The Road Warrior.
The Road Warrior, please. I'm feeling a little bit monotonous. Are we done?
Oh, The Road Warrior for me as well. Murder on the Orient Express or Star Trek Beyond.
Oh, Star Trek Beyond.
Yes, definitely Star Trek Beyond. Murder on the Orient Express or The Lion in Winter.
The Lion in Winter.
The Lion in Winter, please. Murder on the Orient Express or A Star is Born in 1937.
Star is Born 37.
Star is Born for me as well. Well, that lands, we have a trio of Bergman smack dab in the middle of our chart. Murder on the Orient Express in 204, Stromboli at 205, Spellbound 206.
Wow.
Out of 408 films, they're all pretty much sitting right there at the 50% mark.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
It is interesting. What is that? What did that do on your list? Did it fall to the bottom or did it fall to the middle as quickly?
It's close. It's at 1842 out of 4155, which is a 56%. So it's a little higher on my chart.
Okay, that's actually interesting. I'm surprised to say that it landed at 597 out of 1,091, which is a 45% for me. Again, pretty much right in the middle. According to this, if I were to go by the algorithm, this should be a 2.5 star letterbox ranking at letterbox.com/thenextreel. I'm feeling okay about that. It's kind of a middling film. It would probably, if I didn't have a connection to it in my youth, I would probably rate it a little bit lower. But it's sitting right smack in the middle, and that feels like where it should stay.
Is that with a like? With a heart?
Yeah.
Love?
I'll give it a heart. I really have a good time with this movie until the very end, right? I mean, I just feel like that last sequence when he says, okay, option 1, we all go home. Option 2, you all go to jail. What do you think? And the train, Bianchi says, I think option 1. And then we all go home and we basically, wipe our hands clean of this whole thing and it's over. I find that really hard to stomach after the really great job that Branagh did in that same sequence. So it's hard for me to watch this. It loses the entire thread of the morality play, and that sucks a lot of weight out of it. But I do have a good time with the mechanical pieces of this film.
Well, especially because it also, and this is something we haven't talked about, but they're also relying on the fact that the doctor is in the room and Bianchi, I mean, obviously Bianchi's going along with it, but they're relying on all these other people who weren't even involved to just not spill the beans.
Right.
It's like that doctor has blackmail opportunities for the rest of his life.
Yeah, he's a very rich man by the end of this movie. He may not have the money in the bank yet, but he's a very rich man.
Exactly. He's like, oh yes, this is sweet. 12 people? And some of them go by the title princess?
Yeah. You kind of imagine that like, he's sitting there on the train and you want a cut to him where he's just staring off into the distance and kind of shaking a little bit and maybe a little drool coming out of his mouth. Like, doctor, are you okay? What? Wait, how many of you are there again? Let me count. And he's like adding numbers. I want to see that movie. The blackmail movie that follows this one.
That's right. Exactly. That's so great. Well, I ended up, last time I watched it, which was the first time I watched it, it was at 3 stars and a like. Now I feel like after rewatching and really kind of seeing how thin it is on so many levels, I feel like I'm right there with you, 2.5 and a like, because it is a fun watch, and I do enjoy the characters. I enjoy the way it unfolds. I just feel it is a pretty thin thing to watch. You're just watching the puzzle pieces as they move about, and it's fine. It's entertaining enough. But there's just no meat for me to really latch onto.
What if you had to rank this one against the remake?
For different reasons, I think that they're both certainly rewatchable. I think that I love Albert Finney. I think he's a hoot to watch in this one. But I think Branagh's version, I don't know. Because Branagh, he has some really great stuff. And like you're talking about, the ending in his, I think, is a lot stronger. But he also, like that nonsensical chase down the bridge to burn the stuff. And it was just like there were some elements that were super stupid in that one that really frustrated me to no end. So I noticed you're still pretty non-committal. Yeah, it's a weird blend between the two. Like, I feel like if I could do a cut of what I like in both of them, I want to do my own Close Encounters of the Third Kind edit of these two films, an amalgam of them together where I get all the pieces that I like and leave everything else.
Murder on the Next Real Express is what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. New product.
Yeah, here.
Where do we go from here? Now that we have wrapped the train movie, do we get to actually see a movie with our friend Ingrid Bergman in it?
With more Ingrid. Yes, we do. We are going to be, this will be our first Ingmar Bergman film that we have looked at on our show. We're going to be looking at a film late in Ingrid's career. This is 1978, just a few years after this, Autumn Sonata. It is her last feature film, and it will be an interesting one to look at because I've seen it. It's a kind of a difficult film to watch, as most Ingmar Bergman films are, but I think that there are some interesting things happening in this film with Ingrid Bergman, Liv Ullmann, and Lena Nyman. So I am curious about revisiting Autumn Sonata next time.
I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen it. This is one of the ones that is totally new to me, and I'm a little bit nervous.
Have you seen much Bergman? Ingmar, that is?
Only enough to know that I'm not generally... Ingmar Bergman is not making movies for me. How about that?
Me neither.
Okay.
Me neither.
All right.
I think Ingmar Bergman is making interesting films that I have a hard time connecting with.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. But, well, everybody, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, check out our other show, The Marvel Movie Minute. That's a great way to come right off Ingmar Bergman. Forget that, Ingmar. Check out these Marvel movies.
Movie Minute. We are talking about the incredibly complex cinematic history of Iron Man, the tapestry that kicked off...
Is that the one where he's playing chess with death? Yeah. Oh no, that's Obadiah Stane who's playing chess with death.
You know, the one where Johnny Favreau asks those big questions. Why are we here? Is there a God? These are the kinds of questions that we take on in the Marvel Movie Minute.
You can support that show and all of our shows over at thenextreel.com/Patreon. And you can also get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
And Amazon, I think Amazon hath actually giveth. this week. Since we were split down the middle, I went high. You're going low. Would you like to climb the ladder or fall off the ladder?
Let's fall off.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open with Tom, who watched this movie in July of 2017 and says, one of the great movies of all time. Sidney Lumet got great actors to participate ensemble. Richard Widmark said he took the role just to meet some other actors. Several of the actors said it was great fun. It all shows through. Beautifully and elegantly filmed, a must-view movie. 40 years later, and it looks as good as it did back in the day.
Good old Sidney Lumet.
Sidney Lumet. It sounds more like a networking opportunity. I wonder which several of the actors said it was fun.
The ones that Richard Widmark wanted to meet.
Right.
Apparently.
Right.
Well, I've got a 1-star by Basat Films, who says not worth it. And what's funny, it's a 1-star, but it starts with a lot of stars. Because that's his review. A lot of stars. Just ask them. They'll tell you. So many stars. Boring. I like that it's a 1-star review, yet it's full of stars.
It's full of stars.
It's like, is it half full or half empty, Pete?
It's the Interstellar of movie reviews. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver!
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.